So this one is not quite done yet, but it shows pretty well what I do with the background that's almost as visible or as large a part of the painting as the motif itself. So it's important for me to have this like empty space and paint as much with the empty space as with the filled out space, the negative and the positive. And so a lot of the groundwork is in oil and many layers on top of one another. And then when I reach a certain point, I will usually bring in some wax mixed with cosmetics. The wax is this like, it's a pretty old painting medium actually. You used it for death portraits of mummies as well. And it preserves the pigment underneath a layer of wax. So it's pretty durable, and it also has this like matte surface. And it's also, the way I use it, it's pretty thick. All of this is done by a lot of thin layers of wax. And it has this like cloudiness to it that I really like. This has a metallic shimmer to it, and that's the eyeshadow. When you paint, you work with highlights where you paint the light, but the makeup in itself is made to create highlights. So with this shimmer, it wants to catch the sun and kind of make it look like you have a high cheekbone maybe or something. You know, there are so many similarities to the cosmetic, to the makeup, and to the way you paint. And you use the same words. You use shading, contouring, highlights. You do it in the traditional way of painting, and you do it on your face. And I think this kind of similarity is really interesting to go into. I use already existing motifs, and then I tweak them in different ways. So I blow them up to what I call commercial size. So that kind of has this like larger than life size. When I was practicing oil paint, I did copies of Stillleben. And in that process, I realized how similar the Stillleben is to a sort of a commercial image. Because it's staged, you work with light just as much as you work with the objects. You build sort of a microcosmos around it. And there's so much about surface, shiny surface, see-through surface, moist surface, the same as a commercial photo. And I wanted to bring those two worlds to an overlap, because it is these two desire images, but from very different times. And then I also use the cosmetics. So the kind of contemporary and commercialized beauty culture is brought into these like old Stillleben motifs, which historically were also really much about products and luxury and how to get a rare orange or an expensive piece of china, you know, and show them on these images. One day I was wondering about the origins of the word cosmetics. I just thought it was curious what cosmos was doing in that word. And then I looked it up, and then it was this to bring order. Cosmos means to bring order. And I thought, that's interesting that by painting something or like marking something on your face, like lipstick or eyeshadow, you enhance something and thereby bring order. And then the next thought was, well, of course, it's so similar. You call it a makeup palette and you have a painter palette. I mean, it's right there. It's very close to one another. So that's how it began. Lately, I've also been getting into historical paintings, mostly historical fires. Especially, I've been preoccupied with the fire at Børsen. I accidentally biked past it on the way to my studio. And when I saw it, I was really struck by how beautiful it was. It's this complete disaster and people were moved by it, but it was also, the smoke was coming out, and because of all the metals, the smoke was purple and green and orange. It looked really beautiful, and I just thought, that's a great motif. I understand also why it's been a recurrent motif throughout history. I made a big painting for my solo exhibition at Overgaden of Børsen burning, and then I made an even larger one that was 5 meters wide for a group show at Gammelstrand. You see the spire of the building kind of as a silhouette, and then you see mainly the smoke. And the smoke could also look like skies. I've been doing some sky studies as well. I've been looking at these like 1800 romantic painters. They went out and did sky studies, and it's very small paintings and it's cropped, so it's only maybe one sky. And when you see them today, they look weirdly modern because of this. They're completely detached from any landscape, and they look abstract while you at the same time easily recognize the motive. And I think that duality is really interesting, and that's kind of what I've also been playing on with this smoke paintings, also because it's such a destructive thing, the fire and the smoke. It set down a complete building, and when you look at it, it looks like a sky. It looks really innocent in a way, and it's going very slow. And I thought that movement was interesting to get. So I've been more focused on the smoke than on the actual fire. I also did a historic fire. I did the burning of the parliament that burned down in the 1800s, the last time. There is something about those paintings that are interesting because it looks like it's always at night it happens. So it's just a complete black or very dark brown canvas, and then the fire is very present in those motifs. That's also a great motive because of its dramatic kind of appeal, and also it has this, it's like looking into a fireplace. Sometimes I'll manipulate the image, so I'll mirror it or I'll remove a lot of items, because I think also you get so used to seeing these images that sometimes it takes very little to make you see them in a new way. And especially with like 1800s paintings, they have a very strict composition, and if you just mirror it, it looks a little bit off, and you don't really know why, but it looks a little bit off. And I like to do like these very small tweaks, but that makes it kind of come alive again, or make you able to see it again, because you're so used to reading this kind of things. They already exist in different versions, but they're so far from the original that I don't know how well people will be able to recognize it. But I think of it very much as these, like the motifs, I kind of work with them as like a ready-made, like you would do with a sculpture. It's just objects in a painting that I can pick out and then use again in a new way. For me, using historical motifs like this is also a way of being in a conversation with art history and these old painters, and I really enjoy that, because if you let yourself do that, then you have the whole history of art to be in dialogue with, and that it feels like a very free place to work from. Yeah.